Alrighty, we're on.
We're on.
I've got Josh Kuya Culbiao here with me today, and we sit here in Igor's MMA. There was some building works getting done, but you can't see it because I framed us in the cage. It's actually quite cozy, isn't it?
Yeah, in the good part.
In the good part. So, so basically, for people that don't know who Josh is an Australian UFC fighter, Filipino background. And your last outing was at UFC Perth, and I guess let's probably start there before we wind it back a little bit. But you came up against a very interesting guy in Milsik, Bazarian.
Yeah.
And when it comes to fighting and combat sports, how do you approach the mind games aspect of it? Like, because obviously, and the reason why I say that is, we were just at the Showdown event, and shout out to Craig and Brian. That was a great show. For those of you that haven't checked it out, go to combatants.com and check it out. Josh did come on the mic and commentated a fight, and he spoke very well. So, but the reason why I say that is because, as an example, Perry's opponent in Asterios, came in with the mind games, trying to get in Perry's head. Mm-hmm. For you, when somebody's trying to get in your head like that, like how have you approached that in fighting?
Man, I just grew up in that sort of environment where talking shit and just I don't look at it like that. Like I just see it as like another aspect of competition, and it to be honest, it doesn't bother me. Yeah. Like I'm the type of guy that can separate between feelings, emotion, and all that to business and the competition side of things. Like, so to me, all that stuff was just theatrics.
Yeah.
So whatever could have happened, he could have even thrown a few punches at the weigh-ins, and we could have got like properly heated, but like it wouldn't affect the way I would have came into that fight. I still always come into the fight disciplined. I have a game plan, and I can separate between, yes, it is a fight. Yes, we're trying to hurt each other, and getting hurt, it does get emotional because like, oh, he's trying to hurt me, so I got to hurt him back. But I don't see it as that. I see it as like how you would in like soccer, for instance. Someone scores a goal on you. Okay, they're up 1-0. I got to do the same thing back.
Yeah.
And just so happens us scoring our goal is either punching someone in the head, kicking them, hurting them back. So that's our scoring. So I try not to, again, differentiate just because it's physical harm and the dude's trying to inflict pain on you. That I don't get emotional over that. I've grew up in a household with older brothers that used to just beat me up. So it's no different to me.
Yeah, I always think there's a quote from John Danaher where he's like, when you go into competition, you want a warm body and a cold heart.
That's a good one.
How good is that?
That's
right?
a good quote.
A warm body and a cold heart. And you just go in there and you ice people.
That's it. It's all business, man. It's all business. Like, yeah, it's literally I have no feelings in there. It's like when it's done, it's done. Okay, Josh can switch back on, but while I'm in there, it's no longer Josh. It's Kuya that's in there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's like two different people. It flicks a switch.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Like we sort of throughout our lives, we always spend a lot of time actually compartmentalizing ourselves. Like the Josh that's at home with family and friends is probably a very different Josh to the Josh in the cage.
Yeah.
Right? But when you actually think about it, they're all just actually parts of you, right? And then, you're choosing what you accentuate and what you focus on in those specific environments.
Yeah.
Like my wife, as an example, she would often comment, when we were first dating and things like that, and we'd go out and let's say it's a family event and I'm with her side of the family. She'd be like, oh, why are you so quiet?
Yeah.
Right? That's what she'd say to me, right? Yeah. And then I'd be like, look, I get enough of the limelight, from all the other things that I do. Yeah. Sometimes I don't want to be in the limelight. I just want to sit there in the corner. Let me contemplate. I'll play games or do whatever, but just let me eat my food and just sit there quietly.
Yeah, it's like it's like with different friend groups. There's like a meme on social media. It's like when two of your personalities like meet when they're meant to be in like a different friend group. Like you're meant to be this. You're playing a certain type of role in a friend group, and then you meet another friend group, and you got to like even out the balance of who you're trying to be because you got to play different roles in each friend group. So I feel like it's the same thing. You just play a role in the scenario that you're given.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, let's sort of wind it all back for everybody because I think it's always really interesting to sort of understand, what was the situation at home when you were growing up and what was life like when you were growing up. I always like asking people, what their earliest memory is. And the reason why I say that, and I'll tell this story, and apologies if you heard it before, but this will give Josh some time to think. But, for me, I used to remember the first place that I remember is a house that we had in St. Clair, so out west.
Yep.
And I usually tell this story about how we had these 2 big plum trees in the back. And what would happen, because they were so big, you couldn't collect all the fruit. Yep. So in summer, towards the end of summer, all the plums started dropping on the floor. And when it was hot, me and my brother, we used to pick up those plums and throw them at each other. Now, I would always be on the losing end. He's 7 years older than me. Yeah. So you imagine, this little 4-year-old getting, having an 11-year-old throw plums at him. Yeah. Like it was never an even fight, right? But from that perspective, like the unfortunate thing that happened when I was that young was that I think one of those particular days I was thirsty and I've grabbed the hose and I told my brother to switch it on. So I've shoved the hose in my mouth. And because it's quite a long hose, it takes time for the water to come out. Yeah. So he's turned it up full blast. Yeah. But then when it's actually come on, it's choked me and I've passed out and I had to go to hospital and all that sort of stuff. So like that's, these are the sorts of things, that's actually probably my earliest memory. Yeah. Right? And, I don't have it, there's not necessarily any emotion attached to it because I don't see like it as being, a positive or a negative thing. Like I think, the plum throwing thing is actually something that I look very fondly at. Yeah. It was fun. Yeah. So for you in your household, like what do you remember as being one of the first things?
Man, to be honest, one of the biggest things was me and my older brother, just above, a little bit older than me. Yep. Who's about 2 years older than me.
Turn that up a little bit. Yeah. There you go.
Joseph. He's only 17 months older than me. Yep. Probably the earliest memories that I can think of was just me and him constantly fighting in any aspect, whether it was over a Game Boy, whether it was over the Nintendo, whether it was just we didn't like each other at the time and just wanted to fight. That's probably, to be honest, that's probably like the earliest memories that I can genuinely think of is that me and Joseph were always fighting. Yeah, that's probably fighting in the hallway, fighting in the kitchen. And my two older brothers that are older than me and Joseph, and my dad were just watching us fight while mum was probably at work. So, yeah, that's probably my earliest memories is just literally me and Joseph non-stop fighting each other.
Yeah, wow. So then, what did your mum do for work?
So my mum's an accountant.
Okay.
And then she was also working, at that time, as like a second hand, like a helping hand at a restaurant. So she was like a waitress. Yep. She was a dishwasher. She was a cleaner. She did everything.
So she's working 2 jobs back then?
Working 2 jobs.
Wow. And then what about your dad?
My dad was a air duct. He did air ducts, like for the air cons and stuff. Yeah, for the high rises in the city. So that was his job. So yeah, his job was very hard. And my mum was an accountant during the day, and then a waitress / dishwasher at night.
Yep. And then, so you had 3 older brothers.
3 older brothers, yep.
Yep. And then 2 of the oldest ones are quite significantly older, right?
Yep. So Jeff he's 6. Kuya Jeff is 16 years older than me. Then Kuya Justin is 8 years older than me. And then Joseph is only 17 months, yeah.
Yeah. So then, what was that dynamic like? I guess, obviously you and Joseph would have been the closest ones because you're closest in age. It's almost like your friends, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But with the older brothers, so Jeff and Justin, was it?
Justin, yeah.
So with Jeff and Justin, like, what was that dynamic like for you? What do you remember about growing up with those boys?
Well, with Kuya Jeff, it was very, very, it was very harsh love, very, very brotherly love, like very tough love, and it's sort of, it was very tough love from him, what I could remember from a young age. But even my Kuya Justin, he was a bit more of a soft heart. He was a bit more caring, but again, he'd still show tough love, and it's sort of like all trickled down. It would be like Kuya Jeff would pick on Kuya Justin would pick on Joe. And then Joe would pick on me, so it all kind of trickled down, and I copped the worst of it out of all of them. So, yeah, that's what I do remember is that it was tough, but it was also, I don't know, it feels like it kind of played a big role into the person that I became today.
Was there any, I guess, notable, when I say notable fights, like, was there any times when there was, like, immense damage caused, whether it's, like, an injury or, and I'll give you an example. Like, there was this one fight that my brother and I had, and I don't know what it was over, but it was something obviously retarded. And, it became, like, spitting and punching, and then, like, my brother's, like, tried to end the fight, so he's, like, just gone to his room and went to slam the door on me, and I've just, like, kicked through the door. And then after I kicked through the door, it's sort of the realization was like, oh shit, we're gonna get the absolute crap beaten out of us.
the
We
door.
broke the door,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it was like, and then I burst into tears because
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, I'm in
getting
deep shit.
smacked, yeah.
So, were there any, I guess, injuries or?
There's probably one fight, and Joseph probably still brings this fight up to this day. Is that we had a fight in a kitchen, and I still remember Kuya Justin, and my dad were sitting in the living room while me and Joseph were in the kitchen, and at the time, from what I can remember, it felt like the fight was going on for like forever. Like we fought each other. It felt like we fought each other for like 45 minutes straight. That's what it felt like. And the only thing I can like clearly remember from that fight is that I remember I went to shove Joseph into like the dining room chairs, the where we had dinner.
Yep.
I went to shove him into it, and he sort of spun and turned his shoulders and like did a like spinning back fist. He didn't even know spinning
Wow.
back fist, and he cracked me in the nose. I ended up dropping to the floor, and that was the fight was over. I remember just crying nonstop. My nose was bleeding, and my dad was just like, "Yeah, all right, get up, stop being
That's
like
enough.
that. Get up. Yeah, it's enough, but like." Oh, tough love, but go wipe it off. You're
Yeah.
all right. Get up. So that was probably the most intense fight me and Joe has had.
And then I guess just thinking about that relationship with Joseph, right? When did the fighting stop? Like for you guys as brothers, or does he still fight today?
Nah, we don't fight anymore. We don't fight anymore. He like you said, because we were such close age, we ended up being like really, really close friends. More than brothers. It was like we're best mates. You know, we probably had like a real bad relationship with each other and fighting each other up until our 12, 13 age mark, because we found martial arts together. We did taekwondo together. My Kuya Justin got us both into taekwondo.
Yep.
And I feel like we had something that kind of related, like we both related with, and that we could share something together with.
Yep.
And that then, martial arts kind of brought us together, gave us
It's
that
the bond.
bond. Yeah, gave us a bond. That's something that we both liked, and we both liked doing together.
Yep.
And I feel like that was probably the beginning, because up until then, me and Joseph had a proper, I'm not joking. Like me and Joe had like a proper
Sibling rivalry.
any time we could, it was like down each other's throats trying to fight each other, any chance we could. And so I feel like martial arts starting at around that age brought us together. And then obviously as we progressed, I just realized this whole time we've been fighting each other, yet you're actually very similar to me.
Yeah.
So we ended up being growing up and becoming heaps close, and even to this day, I treat Joseph as a really my best mate.
Yeah.
And as much as he's my brother, I treat him as a brother, but I see him as a best mate as well.
Yeah. Okay. So then, for your parents, was there any? And this is always an interesting question, right? Because as a parent myself, I always think about, if my kids were to say, they haven't said it, and no one's come to me and said, "Oh, you love X, Y, Z more."
Mm-hmm.
But was there ever any of that in your household?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I was the baby. Obviously, I was what we call the bunso in the family, and I was obviously the one getting picked on the most, but also I was getting the most. I wouldn't say privilege, but I was getting the most sort of be nice to him, the little extra
the baby.
the extra care, because I was the baby. But definitely got the baby privilege.
So then, with your eldest brother, so he was a half brother, right?
He's a half brother, yeah.
So then, was that from your mum's side or your
My dad's side.
Your dad's side.
My dad's side.
And then, did that make the relationship awkward with him at all, or
Never.
Yep.
Never. Growing up, we always treated him. I didn't even know that. To be honest, I never even knew he was really what a half brother was. So we always just accepted him as if
Same.
he was our own.
Yeah.
There was no differentiation. I still don't. There's still no different. I still don't see it any other different way. Yeah.
Okay. Then when it came to school, so say primary school as an example, how did you? I guess what kind of a kid were you in primary school?
To be honest, in primary school, I was a terror. I was really bad. I was always getting sent to the principal's office. I was just a really bad kid. I was just I felt I was just a menace. Honestly, I was thinking back at it. I did a lot of dumb shit as a primary school kid. And
any examples? So I'll give you one that just came to my mind, right? So those juice boxes, the poppers. So I remember. you know, when we used to when we finished them, you'd blow them up,
Mm-hmm.
and so fill them up with air, and then you'd take out the flaps or whatever, and you'd jump on them to make them pop.
Pop. Yeah.
And I think what happened was I did one with one that was like still half full,
Mm-hmm.
and the juice has gone like all over
Yeah.
the classroom or
Yeah.
like on the wall or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember getting in trouble for that. But like, was there anything in particular?
Man, there's so many. One that comes to my mind, like right off the bat, was I remember we had recess, and I remember my teacher never really locked the door. So me and some of my friends at the time, who's actually still one of my best friends to this day, Norby Horvath, shout out to you. He's still one of my closest friends to this day. We ended up going into the classroom that wasn't locked.
Yeah.
And we flipped the whole classroom upside down. I'm talking about like flipping the tables over, kicking pencils, knocking all over the bookshelves. And yeah, just being absolute menaces for no reason. I still remember, that was just only one instant. And then another instant is that, like, I remember grabbing a couple of kids' shoes and then chucking them in the toilet and flushing them in the toilet. And then obviously the next day I had to cop it from the teachers and obviously my parents. But yeah, I was honestly just a horrible child, a menace.
So, how did your parents take it when like the teachers are calling them and saying, "Hey, you know, Josh has done this. You know, is there something you should be telling us about him?" Or
No, I think it was just I don't know. Maybe I just went through my naughty phase earlier, like my bad teen phase earlier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because in high school, I just straightened up, like fully straightened up.
Yep.
Like I still wasn't the perfect student or the perfect child, but I definitely straightened up in high school. But in primary school, I just felt, like I owned everything. Like I needed to be knocked down a peg. That's what I felt like. You know, I felt like
you're gonna experience this with when you have kids, right?
Great.
Because they go through these phases, and they there's a great book that I recommend this book anyway. Like I think it's it helps to put things in perspective. But there's his name's Joe Newman, and he's got a book called Raising Lions. And basically the premise of the book is he got into early education and dealing especially like with kids with like ADHD, autism, those sorts of disorders. And he talks through like his different methodologies and also gives examples of like how he helped these kids to sort of work through it. But he talks, one of the things that that what you just said remind me of is like this phase that every child goes through where it's called like it's omnipotence. Like you go through this phase where when you're a kid or a baby, you start to realize that, hey, there's other people around, right? So you get this awareness, and then the next phase is now you're starting to test the boundaries of, you know, how powerful are you, right? And you basically need to move from this phase of thinking that the world revolves around you to understanding that there are other people and they have their own world as well. And I guess they call that moving from omnipotence into interdependence, right? But like if, as an example, like if a kid cries and gets their way, then like it's sort of like feeding into that omnipotence, and if it never gets stopped at a particular point, that's when kids go out of control, right? Because you always, and being the baby, it probably makes a little bit of sense, right? Because and it resonates for me because I was the baby as well. So my brother being 7 years older, for me, I learnt very early on that if all I need to do is just turn on the tears a little bit, and you can get out of whatever you want.
Exactly.
Right?
I pulled that trigger too on my parents. Whenever me and Joe needed to get smacked, I'd put on the tears and I'd get smacked less. Where Joe, on the other hand, I don't know if it was his defensive mechanism, but he'd laugh. So he'd end up copping like twice as much as I did. So I was a bit smarter with it. I cried a little bit, and then I only copped a few, and then Joe just he laughed. That was his defense.
So there you go. So there's the I guess the real world practical story behind what Joe Neiman talks about in his book. But yeah, I can't recommend that book enough because we had another friend whose child was in kindergarten with my daughter, and they were having some behavioural issues as well. And so then I was like, they were sort of like talking to my wife about it, and I said, you should recommend the book. And then when they read it, they were like, there's some things that they can sort of see. And it's just a pretty good way to sort of approach or to have some idea about parenting, because when you become a parent, no one ever gives you the handbook to go and say, here's how you be a dad. Right. And when I say that, there is no right or wrong way either. Because what works for some people don't work for others. What you'll find is like with kids, like they've got these genetic traits that they pick up from you. And like I would look at my kids and I go, where the hell did they learn that? Right? But then at the same time, they do things I go, oh yeah, that's me. Shit.
They're a sponge.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They're gonna see. They're gonna see what you do rather than. This is why it's like such a big thing to be like to rather do than say.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna see what you're doing rather than what you tell them to do.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a pretty, interesting thing to sort of reflect back on. I think, when you go back through your childhood and you think about these sorts of memories, like it does help you as a parent as well, because you're trying to understand it from how they perceive things.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was actually, I was messaging one of my like old high school friends, and she sort of said, it's interesting that you messaged me, because I was actually thinking back to our friendship in high school, because my daughter is like, going through a very similar thing. And it's like, it's weird to now be approaching it from a parenting aspect.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, back to you. So I guess, when you mentioned when you went to high school that you straightened up a lot.
Yeah.
Like, were you more, did you become more academic or?
No, I literally was just not as bad as a menace that I was in primary school. I kind of, like what you said, like I kind of knew that other people were around. People had their own worlds and stuff. Like, probably the biggest was, I just started, I feel like I was a bit more sympathetic for others, but also another realization was that Joseph, he was like a massive part of just me growing up and being who I am today, because I seen a lot of the stuff he was going through as in high school, and he did the flip. He was the good one in primary school, and then when high school came, he was the bad one. He was the one that was hanging around the wrong group. He was the one, and I sort of seen it and was like thinking, like, I don't want to do that. Like he kind of paved the way for me. As much as it sounds bad, like he kind of paved the way that like showed me things that I should be doing and shit I shouldn't be doing. So yeah, Joe played a big part with that. Like he was, he done a lot of bad stuff in high school too. So so kind of I won't put him on show on the stuff that he
sounds
did.
like he's gonna have to come and do a podcast with me. So we can talk about this stuff.
He did a lot of bad stuff in high school. So I won't get into that because again, I don't want to put him on show. But yeah, he definitely was a massive guide for me to be like, to what I don't want to do. Like he showed me like if I go down doing this path, hanging around these type of people, this is what's gonna happen. And he was a massive guide. So yeah.
So then, from your teacher's perspective, like how would they describe you in high school? You remember anything that they wrote on your report cards?
Man, talkative. I was very talkative, especially with my boys. It's funny because I feel like when I'm with this is the thing, is that like when I'm with a certain group of friends, I become a part of that. I become a part of that group of friends. Like I'll have guys that like. It kind of sounds cliche and like kind of sounds like it's just like in the movies where there's like a sports team group. I'd hang out with them, and then I'd like, for some reason, I'd just blend in with them. But then also I was like hanging around with guys that would go into the library, read books and play Yu-Gi-Oh cards and do chess. But when I jumped into that group, different Josh again. I don't know how to explain it. I just felt like I blended in to whatever environment that I was in. So I understood what it was to be like why I don't want to hang around certain people, because I end up doing that. Exactly. So
it's funny because when you were talking about that, you made me think of he was probably my best friend when we were in primary school. But this guy named Luke Kayanan, he's a Filipino boy, and it was to the point where he's the one that introduced me to hip hop music. And because back then it was like, Filipinos really into Fila and like that brand Fila.
Fila.
And hip hop music and all that sort of stuff. And for some reason, Filipinos had like this slightly American twang to the way that they spoke. And because I used to hang out with him so much, like I started to speak like him a little bit as well. And but really, it's the Tagalog twang. It's not the American twang. So he's this like, Chinese looking Asian boy trying to speak like he's
a Filipino.
So. And then going through high school, like, did you have any idea what it was that you wanted to do? Like, and I guess this is probably more, generally when you get towards year 12 and things like that, where people really start to think about, okay, what am I going to do next? Right? So in those later years of high school, like, did you have any ideas what you wanted to pursue or what you were going to do?
I knew what MMA was from like year 7, year 8, year 9. I knew what it was. I wasn't doing it at that time yet, but I knew what it was. And I was always fascinated by it. I always enjoyed seeing martial arts, whether it was like I was doing taekwondo at the time, but I knew what MMA was. You know, I seen the first UFC. I've seen Royce Gracie do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I knew all that stuff, but I didn't know what it was. But I was sort of like in my head just gonna be doing what my brothers did, which was a trade. You know, like sort of like, oh, your brothers are doing a trade, you're gonna do a trade. That's like how I sort of thought in my head that my parents sort of, you know,
That's the pathway.
that's the pathway. My brothers are doing a trade, you're gonna do a trade, whether it's plumbing, whether it's electrical, whether it's, you know, carpentry, just a trade. So that was in my head that I was going to do. My dad was doing a trade, doing air duct systems. So you're going to do a trade. So it all kind of like thought it was going to be a trade.
Yep.
But then again, I found martial arts, and it just like, I don't know, it just caught me, and just like, it found me. I didn't find martial arts. I think it found me. So and then it just went down that path. And like I didn't know I would be doing this as a living. I didn't know I was going to be fighting for a living. You know, it just went from one step to the next step. I just loved it so much, and it just like snowballed into what it is now.
Yeah. It's funny. There's like I've seen success from both avenues. Like there's people like Josh Saunders, who trains out of Sydney West, right? He's very big picture, knows, you know, like I would call him like a time traveler, right? Because he approaches life with such confidence, where he's like, I've seen the future. You know, this is going to happen, and this is how my life is going to go, and you know, this is the blaze of glory that I'm going to leave behind me. Whereas, you know, on the flip side, I've got friends like Tim Fung, who's also been on the podcast, but he's the CEO of Airtasker. You know, and Airtasker literally started, you know, when him and one of my other high school mates, Ivan, was sitting in an apartment going, you know, moving sucks. Surely there's got to be someone that we can pay to do this for us. And then that's what was the idea of the genesis of Airtasker, right? And then it just sort of grew and grew and grew until it came to the point where, we've done these rounds of funding. Now it's like, okay, we're at the point where we can IPO. And so, you know, like, so I've seen it happen both ways, and I don't think there's a right or wrong in how to approach it, right? I think with most things, if you can do anything for a sustained period of time, so, you know, I guess, and this works perfectly with martial arts, it's like the white belt to black belt analogy, you know, the hardest belt to actually put on is the white belt.
To start.
Yeah. It's the hardest belt to get, you know, because most people don't actually ever even start.
No.
But then if you put that belt on and you keep turning up and you keep turning up, and you approach it from the perspective of like, you know, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, you will eventually get the black belt.
Yeah.
Right? That's an inevitability.
Yeah.
Right? And so likewise, you know, with the fighting, like the only difference is that you've got an athletic peak, you know, that you've got to sort of work towards.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, there is a little bit of a strategy that comes involved when it comes to that athletic peak and how to maximize your career.
Yep.
But from that perspective, you know, for people that love martial arts, like they'll still find an avenue to apply that same mindset into anything that they do.
Yeah.
So let's digress and talk a little bit about the martial arts journey, and then I want to come back to, you know, post high school and things like that. So you started with Taekwondo.
Yep.
And then did you ever compete in Taekwondo? So
no, I never competed. It was not a sport type Taekwondo. It was a traditional type Taekwondo, where it was like based on a lot of self defense, based on a lot of patterns.
Yeah.
And it was good in a sense of staying disciplined and being able to do stuff that you don't want to do. I think that was a massive thing of it, is that like I didn't want to do this stuff, but I did it because I had to do it.
Yep.
And you know, I forced myself in my head that like it needs to be done, so I'm gonna do it. That was my mentality. Like, as much as I hated it, I didn't want to go to training and I didn't want to do it. It was after school. I was like, oh, I want to be lazy. I forced myself to do it. So it was just like a good training for the mind, if that makes sense.
Yep. And then when did that change? Like, when did it become that, you're actually excited to go to training?
Man, when I started understanding Taekwondo a bit better, and I understood why we were doing it and just the benefits of it.
Yep.
I feel like with traditional martial arts, it teaches you not just you know, like just fighting techniques, but it teaches you more about like honor, respecting yourself, you know, loyalty, you know, just the typical values that martial arts brings. That's what it taught me, you know. So it wasn't so much the fighting techniques that I picked up from doing the early stages of Taekwondo. It was more so like the groundwork of like the mental, how you treat people, loyalty, the way you treat elders, the way you got to respect yourself, you know, the way you present yourself, self-respect, you know, a lot of that stuff. And with the gradings, when I was going through Taekwondo, we had to always like write out essays and about each belt that we went up.
Yep.
We had to write like some sort of essay of like what it means to be like going up this next level and what has changed with you, and it was a lot of like self-reflection, and it like kind of like really like made you think about what you were going through and how you got there, and what did you gain, and what's your new insight just because you gained a new belt. It was good. It was good in that sense.
Do you still carry on with that self-reflection in your life now? Like,
yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that daily. Right? Yeah. To be honest, I do that daily. I catch myself sometimes and just be like, all right, what's next, or what's going on? What's going on in Josh's world, sort of thing. So it's like, I trying to do that. Yeah, nearly every day, and be like try to set new goals, because, again, my whole dream was always to be to get to the UFC, right? I got to the UFC, so that's the goal done. Yep. Does that mean I stop? No. So the next goal was, I got to win this next fight. I got to win this next fight. I got to win this next fight. I want the belt. Yep. You know what I mean? So it's like that's sort of my mindset going into it.
I want to ask you about this because, when you achieve a big goal like that, so, and I'll give you, I guess, a bit of the backstory for me. So, I had this thing when I was working in the automotive industry that I wanted to be a dealer principal of a car dealership. Yeah. And at the time when I was like 28, I went to work for a public listed company, Automotive Holdings Group. And I started there as like what they call an operations executive. It's kind of like an area manager type role. And, my boss at the time already knew that that's the direction that I wanted to go. And he was like, yeah, he was, keep working and, we'll get you there eventually. And then through a bit of luck and some circumstance, one of the dealer principals that they'd employed for one of their businesses decided to quit for whatever reason. And that gave me an opportunity to step into that role. And it was one of those things where, like, I had built this thing up in my head that, I'm 28. Okay, by the time I'm 32, this is where I'll be, and I had this like plan of like getting there in that 4 years. And then I get it like almost overnight. I'd worked in that capacity for 8 months, and then I had this opportunity to become step in as a general manager and work my way into basically being
straight
a DP.
Away. Yeah.
And like, one of the things that it sort of shattered my world a little bit, because like, you'd build up this goal, and when you achieved it, you sort of realize that it didn't actually change my life that much. Right? Yeah. Does that resonate for you? Like, you fight and then you get this, of course it's exciting, don't get me wrong, but like you realize that, it doesn't end here.
It's actually a big thing. Just recently, I had that fight with my second last fight with Choi in Singapore. I knew that was my last fight in on my contract, and I didn't know if I was going to get re-signed. Yep. And so I just went out there and fought my ass off and gave it my all, regardless win or lose. If I was to lose, I've lost that fight, I probably would have stopped fighting. Yep. And if I didn't get re-signed, I probably would have stopped fighting. Yeah. So I just went out there and fought my ass off, and it just, again, like, as much as it was nice to win, get re-signed, have put on such an amazing performance, it didn't, how do I put it? It's like everything that I wanted, I got, but I think because I put like an expectation on how I should feel, it sort of took away everything. You know what I mean? Like you said, you got your dream goal basically overnight. And the same for me is like I got everything that I wanted, but for some reason I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel content. I felt like nothing has changed. Yeah. Nothing has changed. The people that love me still love me. Yeah. My friends are still my friends. My family is still my family. Yeah. The people I train with is still people that I train with. Nothing has changed. And it's like almost like I like had an expectation I should feel a certain way, and it kind of put me in a slump. Even though everyone should be like, oh, congratulations, you got re-signed to the UFC, you put on such a good fight, you won your fight. Everyone's like over the moon for me. But in my own head, because I put that expectation of feeling a certain way, and I didn't feel that certain way,
put you in a negative space.
Yeah, I was in a bad space, because I was like, if I was meant to feel this certain way, and I got everything that I want, it almost made me feel like as if I was being ungrateful. That's what it felt like. Felt like, am I being ungrateful right now? Yeah. Like I got everything I wanted, but it didn't feel like my heart was full. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know how to explain it.
That is, I think you've hit on something that I think. And don't get me wrong, right? Like, this isn't a thing to say don't have goals. This is absolutely a thing to say have goals. Yeah. Right? The way I started to look at life for me personally is like I view life as like there's these checkpoints, right? And one of the things that I'm fortunate enough to have learnt from doing all of these podcasts and talking about life so much is like I can almost see what stage of the journey people are at, and there's probably stages past where I'm at, right? But you know, and I can only listen to the stories that, you know, some other people share with me and try and remember those when I hit that sort of milestone in my journey. But I sort of have worked out, like, when you have something that is really important to you and you're working, like, you know, you put all this effort into achieving this goal and you build it up like it's going to change your life. Like, that's a checkpoint. That checkpoint is like you get there and then you realize that, oh, actually didn't really change my life that much. And then that's actually a fork in the road, because what happens in your life there is that you go and say, okay, maybe that didn't do it, but if I go one step further, that's going to help me feel the way that I should feel about it, right? So then, you know, some people will go down that pathway. So as an example, it could be like, say, using a guy that's working a white-collar job in a corporate situation, buys a house and he goes, oh, yeah, bought the house that I wanted. And I was like, oh, you know, I got the house, but it didn't really change my life that much. I think I need a boat, you know, and then you buy the boat and then it's like, oh,
I got the boat now.
Now I need a jet.
Yeah.
Right? Or I need a bigger mansion, or I need the G-Wagon, or, you know, like you put all these goals in that are meant to motivate you and keep you going.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one fork in the road, that you can either go down that pathway or you go down the pathway. And this is sort of the pathway that I've gone down, is that, you know what, I don't really know what's next. Right. But all I know is that if I keep doing the things that I love and I do it with discipline and I do it with passion, the outcome is going to be the outcome. Like, there could actually well be, you might still tick off all those things on your list, but rather than walking down the pathway of chasing that goal, hitting the goal and then realizing it didn't change my life, chasing that goal, hitting that goal and realizing it didn't change my life, I can go, I'm going to savor every moment of this journey, the highs and the lows. Right?
Yeah, I had a chat with my coach, and my coach, I treat him like my dad.
Yeah.
You know, I lost my dad at a young age, so I've always treated Igor as like my dad.
Yeah.
So like we had a conversation about this. It's like, it was never about getting to the UFC.
Yeah.
It was never about getting re-signed.
Yeah.
It was about the journey.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds so cliche and sounds so, like, you know, cringy, and just sounds so like, just like, it's literally the way you just being caught up in that moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, and oh man, it's just, everything's playing in my head now, but like, just seeing like all the amateurs fight.
Yeah.
At one stage, I was doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now it's like, I was speaking to Alan about it as well, is that like, it just all goes full circle. Those boys that are fighting in the amateurs now, they're going to be in my position.
Yeah.
You know? And then vice versa. They're going to be the ones that are going to be coaching the next generation. They're the ones going to be helping the next generation. And it just like sort of goes full circle. And you got to learn to enjoy it. It's not just about, again, it's not as much as it is nice, like, yes, I want the belt. Yes, I want to be in the UFC. Yes, I want to get re-signed. Yes, I want to be on the big money hour. Yes, I want to be a superstar. But it's about the journey of getting there. And even, like you said, even whether it's the highs or the lows, you take it all in. You embrace it all. It's a part of it all. Yeah. You know? So
I think when you start to think like that, it's actually a very powerful tool, because it gives you a freedom that you otherwise wouldn't have. Because I think, you know, the constraints trap of going down the other pathway of saying, you know, this is my next goal, this is what I want to achieve, is that when things don't go your way, it could derail you completely.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Whereas, you know, when you go down this other pathway of looking at it from the perspective, I'm just going to keep doing the right things, you know, I'm going to keep being disciplined in my approach and how I focus on things. And then really, like, you know, one of the ways that I like to sort of think about this is that if you think about, like, let's say for whatever reason, we're all dead tomorrow, right? And, you know, this podcast was the last podcast that I was going to do today. You know, this training session is going to be the last training session that I was going to do, or this is the last time I'm going to see my kids. You know, how different and how much, what a different energy that you apply to those sorts of things.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess, you know, for you, you know, as you journey into parenthood, like, I think that's one of your rituals that will probably change pre-fight. You know, like, I know for me, when I compete, you know, having kids, it was very different. Like, I was saying this to someone else just the other day, that, you know, before I went up to fight, I literally was in my kids' room saying goodnight to them. And I told them, you know, I love you so much, as if it was the last time I was going to say it. Because, you know, yes, it's regulated and everything else, but you don't know what's going on, right? And for me, you know, when I went up there, I wanted to make sure that I've said everything in my heart so that I can have this freedom to be and express myself. Yeah.
But imagine being able to do that every day. Like,
Exactly.
you never know. Like, you could walk out of the house, step on the street, get run over.
Yeah, but you can do it every day. This is the power, right? In how you when you think like that.
Yeah.
When you think about this other pathway of enjoying the journey, and I guess I want to digress because I actually like talking about faith. So for me, there's a whole story behind this, but I had a mescaline trip. So mescaline is like distilled from a cactus.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did it, it wasn't like, I just want to get high or whatever. It was actually like a specific purpose. I went in there, I had like written down questions about what I want to ask spiritually. And basically, I had this experience that was, mind altering. And I guess physicality wise, if you look at what mescaline does, it's like a paralytic. So it causes you to like have partial paralysis here and there or whatever. So for me, what it was is like I was spasming. So I'd have like this spasm, right? And because you haven't heard this story, I'll share it because I think it sort of gives you the context, right? But if you imagine like a lake, a nice still lake, and normally a lake's got sides, but you imagine this thing just went on for forever, right? And then, because it's so flat, there's a finger and it comes down from the middle and it just touches in the middle of the lake. And then straight away you see all the ripples, right? And that to me was like representing, the Big Bang, when the universe started or whatever the case may be. And these ripples just go on for infinity. Right, and then that would be like, so I'd be spasming, like literally, like just twitching, right? And it'd be like almost in time with your heartbeat, and it'd be like boom, 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 boom,
Spasm to the
boom,
heartbeat.
boom, 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 and it'll get faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until suddenly it stops. And basically, at that point where it stops, you're dead. Like it feels like you died, right? And then after it feels when I was, I guess, going through the experience, it felt like a very long time. But then suddenly, boom, boom, it starts again. And it just started to get faster, boom, 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 and then you die again.
Yeah.
And like, when I think back on it, when I tell this story, people are like, it doesn't sound very pleasant.
No.
Right? Because this happened over and over and over and over and over again.
It felt like you
It felt like I died 10,000 times.
Jesus.
Right? And it'll be like, I'm back. Right? And I'm now, whatever, I'm living as a different person. I'm a girl, I'm a boy, I'm whatever.
Yeah.
And I live this life and I'm dead.
Yeah.
And then I'm alive again.
Yeah.
And then I'm dead again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck.
What is going on?
What is going on, right? Like, and so if you were to just think that this life is all there is, then it can actually take you down this pathway that, well, life is meaningless. Because in 100 years' time, there's a whole different set of people.
Yeah.
In 1,000 years' time, like you're long forgotten. In 10,000 years' time, what did it matter?
Yeah.
Right? So if there was nothing after we died, it's very easy to then, I think it would be very easy to go down the pathway of like, what's the point in living then?
Yeah.
Right? But if there is something that for you after death, then the gift that, and I'll use the word God, but you can say creator or whoever you want to say it is, right? But the gift of love that they have given us is this ability to experience life, right? And like, I guess the perspective that I gained from it was that if you're God and you're this all-powerful, omniscient being, right, you couldn't really give two fucks what anybody on the world is doing because, like, it doesn't really matter.
Doesn't affect you.
Doesn't affect you. You're God.
Yeah.
You got people complaining. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah,
like,
cool.
here's a flood.
Yeah.
Right? or here's a famine. Like, it doesn't really matter, right? Or you got people that pray and worship you. Okay, sometimes the people that pray and worship to you, well, here's cancer.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it can happen like that.
Yeah.
Right? And if you approach it from that perspective and you try and think of it from that perspective, you go, oh, God doesn't sound like this God's a very good person, right? But if you actually take the time to then try and understand it from an alternative perspective that, we as humans, we're given this choice to live a life, that we're given this control to choose what it is that we do. And we get outcomes based on those decisions, right? Yes, sometimes things happen that aren't anything that we've done, like a family member passing away that gets cancer and passes away as an example. That's nothing that we may have done. But we have a choice through that suffering to choose how we respond to it. And for some people, it might take them further away because they get very angry and they go, if God really existed,
why would he do this
why would he do this to me?
Yeah.
Right? But then through suffering, perhaps there's a learning there that, hey, God, whether it's God calling somebody back to them or the fact that, through their suffering, you can actually find gratitude for the time that you actually got to spend with that person. Because you might be, obviously very angry that you've lost somebody. But for other people, they may never have met their parents, right? And I guess, so there's two parts to this discussion. The first is I'm curious in terms of like how you view faith is the first part, and then the second part, I'm curious to sort of ask some questions about your dad. But let's talk a bit about faith first.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Catholic household.
Yep.
Filipino Catholic household. I used to go to church every Sunday.
Yep.
Growing up, I was actually altar boy. Me and my brother were altar boys. So every Sunday we were there, and yeah, we were always helping the priest out with the ceremony and whatnot. And yeah, every Sunday we were at church, and yeah, I used to pray every night. Mum forced us to pray every night. But
and
yeah,
you Filipinos are into like the really crazy Catholicism, you know, like
we were real deep into it. My mum especially. But yeah, I do deep down think that there is something out there that created all this. It just didn't happen for the sake of just happening. And yeah, I do believe that there is something that created all this. This wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the person above, you know, the person that started all this. So yeah, I do believe in if you're asking if I do believe in God or not, I do believe in a creator, in a person that started all this. Yeah.
And then for you, I guess, you know, having gone through that sort of strict religious upbringing, how would you rationalize your relationship with God now? So, and the reason why I ask that is because I feel like, and there's a great analogy. I think I heard it on the Joe Rogan podcast, but one of his guests was saying it's like, you know, with the Abrahamic religions, so religions like whether it's Islam or Christianity or Jewish orthodoxy or whatever, it was like, you know, the Jews are like, it was really strict. So then God came and gave us Christianity. So it's like, okay, we'll relax some of the rules. And then it was like, it was less strict, but then people went a little bit too crazy with the Protestantism and all that. So it was like, okay, we've got to bring back some rules. So then that's when Islam came along. Yeah. So it's like this evolution of God giving us different religions to sort of cater to, you know, what are the lessons that people need to learn.
To learn, yeah.
But I guess, you know, why I'm always curious about this is because, you know, for some people that grew up in I guess, that strict sort of religious sense, it turns them away from it because they're like, oh, I don't like the whole idea behind these rules and things like that. But and for other people, like, so for me myself, I actually grew up more Buddhist. Yeah. Right. My dad's a Buddhist and my grandma was a Buddhist on my dad's side. My mum she's an agnostic. Yeah. You know, she'll sort of say whatever and she'll believe whatever. Yeah. You know. Yeah. But for me, I've sort of come to this understanding that there is a God, and I think the important question for me wasn't so much how do I practice this faith. It was like, what do I want that relationship to be? Yeah. Right. So as an example, you can have a dad and you don't talk to him. Yeah. Right. So if you were to view God like a father, you can have no relationship with him. Yeah. And it's like, well, he doesn't do anything for my life. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what happens. Yeah. Right. So you can take that view, or you could take the alternative view of, like, you know, with your dad. Okay, I want to talk to you. Yeah. You know, I want to share what's in my heart. I want to. Yeah. I want to ask questions, and then, you know, look for signs that you can potentially guide me. And I think for me, I find there's power in that, in expressing that gratitude, because I feel like most of the times when people pray, it's because they're going through difficulty. Yeah. Right? You pray when you want something. Yeah. And it's kind of selfish that way, isn't it? Well, you think about if that was your parents. Yeah. And you go, oh, you know, Dad, I love you so much. Can you buy me a Game Boy?
Yeah, I need this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that.
It is like that. Yeah.
And so I didn't want my relationship with God to be like that. So, you know, from that perspective, like, I have a daily prayer practice. Yeah. I don't think it necessarily fits in with what, you know, most people would say prayer is, but, like, you know, we pray, and I would express my thanks, and I'd pray, you know, for, like, you know, I'd be gratitude first, express gratitude first of all. But secondly, also, you know, express myself in terms of, you know, what are the things that I worry about, and what are the things that I want to sort of let go of, so that, you know, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Yeah. You know, but I guess, you know, what does that look like for you?
Man, like, growing up in that sort of strict religious household, it showed me that, like, just because you went to church or you prayed every night didn't make you a good person. Yeah. Like, just because you did that doesn't mean you are above someone else. Yep. Doesn't mean that just because, oh yeah, I prayed to God today, I'm better than you. Yep. I see it all the time, to be honest. I see it just because, oh yeah, you pray to a certain God, you have a step over. It's not about that. I've always realized that. Again, I look at religion as like martial arts. It teaches you values. It teaches you certain things. And what does most religions do teach you? They teach you to treat people the way you want to be treated. Yeah, they always say love thy neighbor. You know, love yourself like how you would want your neighbor to treat you. Yeah. You know, and that's with probably all the religions, you know. So again, I treat religion very similar to like what martial arts has taught me. You know, has taught me a lot of different values. And like just because you're doing a certain thing doesn't make you above someone else. Just like, for instance, a lot of people get caught up that just because, we'll bring it back to fighting because that's one thing I can relate with, is that a lot of people think just because I'm in the UFC that I'm above someone. When I'm in the gym, I'm the same as the guys that are fighting amateur. I'm the same as the guy that just comes in to do a workout. I'm no different. And that's how I treat it. I'm equal to everyone. You know what I mean? But obviously, don't get me wrong, that there's like there's a part of me inside of me that I know that I'm different and special compared to somebody else. But when I'm here, I'm equal to everybody else. So I treat the religion values as the same as martial art values. So very similar.
So I guess, you know, can we talk a bit about your dad? Yeah. So what happened with him?
So my dad had a very bad headache at work, and he just had a couple of days off. Thought it was just a migraine, and then the migraines just got worse. Went to the hospital. They said, okay, we got to do a scan. They ended up finding a tumor in his head. Wow. Like the size of like a golf ball. So it was a pretty big tumor in his brain. And then that was probably like one of the first times I ever seen my dad cry, when he had to explain to us that he was going to go through a procedure that had like a 40% chance of him dying going through the procedure, cutting out his brain tumor. Or if not, he was going to be left like a vegetable. Wow. So that was probably the first time I did see him cry.
And how old were you when that happened?
I'd say I was about 17.
17.
Yes. Yeah, around 16, 17.
Yeah.
Around that age. And then, he got through that first surgery, was all good. But then the doctors were sort of like, okay, well, you have this tumor in your brain, but why? Like, why is it there to begin with? So they ended up doing like a full body scan on him. And they ended up finding that like his lungs were just riddled with cancer. So by the time he ended up finding out that the brain tumor was from the lungs, it was because the lungs were so bad, like it was like already
spreading.
Yeah, it was so bad that it was spread towards his head. This cancer spread towards his head. So by that stage, they already gave him like the time limit of like, oh, you're only gonna make it till I forget the October or November end of the year. And and then that was just like, wow, that was the massive one that like they all said like, that's it, like no matter what we do, it's game set match sort of thing. It's done. Like it's
did that. So I guess the first question is, what were your sort of emotions with it, and I guess your family and like how you guys took it? Like I guess how did you sort of cope with this?
Yeah. Again, it was
16, 17, you're in year 12, right? Or like
just finishing year 12.
Yeah.
Just finishing year 12. But it was it was a full on time for all of us. It was just
Did you guys take it differently, like your brothers and you, or?
I think we all took it on board pretty much the same. We all had our different little outlets. Mine was obviously the gym. Me and Joe was obviously the gym.
Yep.
And competing and whatnot, trying to get our mind off it. But it was definitely a tough time. You know, you're a teenager and you find out that your dad's gonna pass away, and trying to take it all in is kind of tough, you know.
And I guess how did your mum take it?
Well, she was the worst. She was just like days on end, just crying, and just like we tried to block it out, and just basically every night you could just hear her crying in her room and whatnot. So it was
it's a rough time.
Yeah.
Did that change your dad's approach to life at all? Like I guess, you know, when you get given a diagnosis like that, some people would look at it from that perspective. Okay, I've got this much time left to go. I need to try and maximize everything that I do, like the bucket list style thing.
Yeah,
like, I guess what did he do?
He to be honest, when he got first told, he was just like straight in the dumps. Like obviously he was already withered. Like his body, he was going through chemo and he was trying to do everything to try and get better, but like his body was already like on its way out. He was ready, you know, he was half the size he was. And he was just like moping around the house. And he had a very bad outlook, and he was just like, it was tough, you know. Imagine being told that you only got this much time to live, and whatnot. But it was tough, and there was I I remember one thing that I said to him that was pretty bad, but it was like he was moping around the house all day, and I'm there and I'm seeing him, and we all know that like he has a time limit. Like they all said that like, he's gonna die at this time and that's it. Like there's no other way around it. And just because I was seeing him every day the way he was, it like kind of
angry.
It got me annoyed. And I said to him, like I just bursted out in emotion. Just was like, you all know we're all struggling already, and it's like we all know that this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like the least you could do is just take it all in and just try to enjoy it instead of being,
Yeah.
you know, the sad sack and just like, you know, mope around the house all day. So that was probably like one of the things that I do remember during that time.
Yeah. Did that did that come on board for him, or like?
Yeah, he did. He obviously tried, and it's tough. Like I understand, but like also, it's a lot to take in. You know, knowing that you're going to die, but then also trying to put on
a happy face.
A happy face for the rest of us.
You know what the crazy thing is though, is that we're all eventually going to die.
It is. It's true.
Right? Yeah. Like, so, you know, this is where, and, you know, it's really bad when, you know, you get given a time limit like that. And, you know, I had another friend who came on the podcast, Robert Fletcher, and he also battled cancer, and he passed away last year. And I'm actually just grateful that I got a chance to actually sit and do a podcast with him and share, you know, a whole bunch of different stories. And we were talking about life and all these different experiences. And his daughter, Kristen, she's a beautiful girl, musician as well. And, you know, at the funeral, like she came up to me and she goes, I'm so glad that, you know, Dad got that chance to sit with you and share his stories, because there were some things, like some perspectives that he shared that even she didn't know. Yeah. Right. And I was like, oh, it just filled me with such gratitude, because, you know, Rob's perspective on it was like, when the doctors told him that, you know, you're fucked, you know, life's over for you, start, you know, making your arrangements or whatever. He was like, you know, he grabbed, his daughter was with him and he grabbed her hand and he said to her, you know, there's going to be a miracle, because either I, you know, get to live another day and I get to spend this beautiful time with my daughter and her family, or I die and I go and spend my time with God. Right. So either way, that's a miracle. You know, and I was like, wow, that's such a powerful perspective.
To look at it like that.
And then the other thing that makes it so powerful is that when you have somebody who can face their own mortality and have that sort of confidence, like for Kristen, it's like, I can only imagine how much that actually, as bad as it is that you're losing your father, but that should actually make you feel better about it rather than being really bitter and angry about it. Because I feel like a lot of people, they get very bitter and angry about it. They go, you know, this fucking happened in my life, and they never recover. Yeah. Right? Whereas, you know, part of the journey of life is that, like eventually your parents are going to leave. Yeah. Right? And hopefully, you know, your parents leave before you leave, because the only thing worse than losing your parents is a parent losing their child. Their child, right? And so it's one of those things that, you know, being able to experience that gambit of emotions, like, it's not nice, right? You know, I'm to share a story, you know, like, and I've talked about this before, this little moth, people can't see it, there's a moth buzzing around, and Josh and I were trying to grab it. Yeah. But, I was actually, so I've told this story before, but my mum and dad were having like a tough time in their marriage, went towards the end of my high school time as well. And what actually happened was, then my mum was driving her car going to work, and a teenager ran out onto the road chasing a tennis ball, and her car hit him. She couldn't turn in time. 60 k's an hour, Prospect Highway, going over the overpass at Seven Hills or something like that. And that was like the thing that broke her, because before that, my mum was like in tears, you know, every night. Obviously upset with my dad, very angry and all that sort of stuff. And then, you know, I'm same like you know, 16, 17, 18, whatever. And you don't really know how to approach it. You know, like, what am I supposed to... I didn't know what counselling was back then. Exactly. I didn't know any of those sorts of things. Yeah. And so when that happened, it was like, you know, we just sort of just carried on life as usual. And then it was like, oh, my mum started to get a bit weird. You know, she started to get paranoid about things. And, you know, she would say, like, you know, people are following her, or they're trying to make it out that she did it intentionally. Or she'd be telling me things like the traffic lights just changed suddenly, and or the people on the radio were speaking about it, like, you know, that's how it started. And you just sort of, at that age, because you don't know, you just play it off, and you're like, oh, you know, Mum, you're just being silly. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then as a child, like, you know, your parents don't want to listen to you. They won't listen to you. Even now, my mum still tries to tell me how to live my life. Yeah, you're an adult. You have your own kids. Yeah. But when that I guess what happened there was, to try and cut the long story short, when I went to uni, I said to my mum, why don't you go overseas and go and see your family and all that sort of stuff. In the end, she wouldn't come home. And at first, she got a little bit better. It seemed like she got a little bit better, having seen family and things like that. But then she got worse because there was nobody there. Nobody had sort of known exactly what had happened. No one was there to help her. So she was living with her auntie. And then in the end, her auntie ended up kicking her out of the house because she started like taking things apart, saying that she wanted to clean them. But then if they broke, she'd just throw them out. So obviously she's living in a sister's place.
Breaking everything.
Breaking all the sister's stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And it got really bad to the point where like, I think when at one point she was like living in an apartment or something like that, like my dad put her up somewhere and she'd took all the furniture out of it. It's basically just, it was like going into an empty room. And why she got kicked out of that apartment is because she was trying to dismantle the light fitting and switched off the power to the entire building. You know, she's like it's just through luck that she didn't electrocute herself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the only way she came home was that she was living on the streets of Singapore for 2 weeks before she came home. Like I don't know where I still to this day do not know where she lived, where she slept, you know, what happened during that time, what she ate.
How'd she get home?
We finally managed to book her a ticket. When she left, she had 2 suitcases full of stuff. She came back with just the clothes on her back. Right? And I was like, where'd all your stuff go? She'd thrown it all out. And like I still remember like when I saw her, she was at my parents' office in Seven Hills, and I went there to see her when she came back. And the moment I saw her, she was like really tanned because she'd just been living homeless like outside for 2 weeks, and she was so skinny because I don't know, she probably didn't eat for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That I burst into tears. Like it was like what the like
it's a completely different person.
Completely different person, and like just a shell of a person, right? And, you know, then that was the start of like, you know, we had to go through this whole process of trying to get her help and things like that. But, you know, there's 2 ways that you can approach that. Like you can either be very angry and resentful about something like that happening, or you take responsibility and you look at it from the perspective, okay, this is my situation and what can I do about it? And I took that pathway. So like at that time, you know, I was already studying at uni. I went and got a job. I was doing a mechanical apprenticeship. So did a trade just like you.
Yeah.
And basically just started working, and that's what kicked off my career. I was working full time, 1 day a week at TAFE, uni full time, training 4 or 5 days a week, martial arts.
Yeah.
You know, trying to make it all work.
Yeah.
And you know, managed to finish my degree and start my automotive career. But when I look back on it, like that was like some of the hardest years of my life. You know, but at the same time, you know, would I change any of it? No, because without any of that, I wouldn't be in this position here today. You know, when you, I guess, reflect on that, you know, that time, those last, you know, bit of time with your dad, like, how do you sort of reflect on that?
Man, again, I was like, what you said is that, like, I was very bitter, very, like, angry at the world. Why did they take my dad so early? I didn't even get to show him, you know, what I was capable of being a man, growing up, being a man, having kids, you know, having grandkids for him, you know. Yeah, it kind of stole a lot of moments in my head. Like, in my head, that's what I was thinking. But then also I knew, like, again, I believe in something bigger than us.
Yep.
So I just knew, like, that no matter what happened, that Dad would be looking down anyway, proud regardless of what I'm doing. So whether if he's here or not, he would be. And that's just one of the ways that I do reflect on it now, is that going through it all is that it made it. At that time, I was, all over the place, but getting a bit older and realizing that, like, all the stuff that I'm doing now is, like, in memory of him, in trying to make him proud. Even though I know he would be proud regardless of if I did not do the stuff that I've done. But just, I use it as a extra motivation to make him proud. Like, he was a big person that, like, he was very big on being proud of who we were. He was very proud of our last name. He always said to me, wherever you go, you know, make sure they pronounce your name right. Make sure that you're proud Culibao. And he was very, very, like, proud to represent the Philippines. And I'm very proud to be who I am. I'm very proud to where they came from. Even though I was born here, I'm very proud to be Filipino, just because I understand how hard they worked to get here. Yeah.
Is there any, I guess, and before we just move on from the topic of your dad, like, is there any, like, fond stories or, like, I guess your fondest memory of him that you'd like to share?
Man, probably just one that really means a lot to me was I I was selected to go to the Australian Pancration World Championships
Yep.
in Greece in 2012.
Yep.
And I obviously wasn't working at the time. I just finished high school, had no money. My dad was like, I want you to do it. He was he believed in me, and he gave me the green light to chase this dream. And he goes, yeah, I'm going to pay for everything. Paid for my flight. And up until this point, I've competed quite a bit, and I've never lost. And I went to the championships. I made it to the finals. I lost in the finals, my first ever loss. And I remember calling him, and I was crying, and I was telling him, Dad, I lost. And then he just let me cry, and then he just said to me, doesn't matter whether you were to get there last or nothing. He goes, I'm proud of you just because you're chasing your dream and you're doing what you want. So that's probably, one of the biggest moments. And then a year later, I qualified again for the Australian Pancration team. I got selected again because I won the tournament. This time the championships were held in Melbourne. And this is when my dad was already diagnosed with cancer. So I was going to compete while he was still going through this stage. And I got a photo of it. Is
that the one with you and Jamie and
Dave? Oh no, that was the World Pancreas.
Okay,
that was the one in Greece.
Okay.
So the one in Melbourne, he ended up flying over. He ended up watching me compete, and this is where I got the gold medal in the World Pancration Championship. So that was like a big moment for me because it was like a final, being able to just fight for my dad like one last time and walk away with gold. You know what I mean? It was very, that one meant a lot because he was already on his last legs, and he still traveled all the way to Melbourne for me and to watch me compete and stuff. So that was probably really memorable for me.
He would have been so proud.
Yeah.
And you're going to experience this soon too. When you become a parent, there's nothing that warms your heart as much as seeing your kids do well. Just on, I do want to digress for 1 second. That picture with Jamie Malaki, and you got David Tong in there as well. Yeah. So David's my jiu-jitsu coach. So I was like, when you posted it, I was like, I flicked it to Dave. I go, is that you? And he's like, yeah, that's me. I was like, okay. So Dave sends his regards.
Yeah, he's a legend. Dave's a legend.
So okay, let's go back into the story of life a little bit for you, and I want to talk about the trade. So you went and you completed an electrical apprenticeship?
I basically got to just do the main tests. I've done my experience. I've done my 4 years of electrical in the study. And I just have to go and sit this what we call the capstone test.
Okay.
So that's I just have to sit that, and then I've accomplished my goal as a trade.
Okay.
But you
haven't brought yourself to do it yet.
I'm kind of like at that stage now. It's like, what's the point? I'm fighting in the UFC now. I'm doing what I want anyway. It's like, it was the trade's a funny thing. Is that it was one of those things that would just I did to sort of not so much as a plan B, but more so to get my mum off my back. It was just like all right, mum, I'll do this for you, but I want to fight.
Yeah.
Like that was it. And if fighting didn't go my way, at least I had something. But I didn't look at it like that. I looked at it as like, just to make mum happy, I'll do this.
Yep.
And I'll train on the side anyway. And I was fighting anyway. So I did it as a sort of like a scapegoat to be like, for her to let me to keep training and let me to keep chasing that dream of fighting. So
it's one of those, I think we're in a very interesting age now where it's like, because the mentality in, say back 20 years ago was like, you need to put all your eggs in one basket. You need to focus and do everything, just down that specific pathway. Yeah. But the access to information is very different to what it is now.
Now, yeah.
Right? Even like if you look at the progression of martial arts, over that period of time from the first UFCs to today, it's chalk and cheese. Yeah. Like the mindsets are so totally different. The evolution of the sport, you look at like the jiu-jitsu guys, like there's so much evolution in terms of what's going on there. Even in the striking's become its own thing. Yeah. MMA striking is very different to
straight striking.
Straight striking now. Yeah. The feints, the levels, everything is just so different to what it was. Yeah. That, with the sort of access to information that people have, you can become, remarkably good in a very short period of time. And then, if you've got the right attitude and the demeanor to handle the pressures of fighting, it can actually make you quite successful. Yeah. But I think, there is definitely merit in always, having something else to fall back on. Because at the end of the day, you might, come to the end of your fighting career and you go, I wouldn't mind becoming a Sparky and, being able to build my own house and get a builder's license or do something like that. Like, I think throughout life we go and chase multiple careers. Yeah. I've sort of, got my foot out of the door in terms of automotive, but then I'm like building up this new career.
Podcasts,
Yeah.
interviews,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right? And so it's like, it's exciting. Like that, you need to always be a beginner at something, right?
Love it. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that mentality of putting yourself in that uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I see it a lot, is the reason people don't like to start something new is they don't want to feel like stupid. They don't want to be asking stupid questions. Like, that's why you'd hardly ever see somebody that is amazing at striking and they've been doing striking their whole life try and learn jiu-jitsu, because they've been doing some sort of combat, but then they go to a class and they absolutely know nothing about it, but they don't want to ask, they don't want to learn about it, you know what I mean? So just learning to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to learn something feels stupid. It's yeah,
fair. Let's switch gears a bit, because I want to ask about this. As you sort of gained a little bit more notoriety and people start to recognize you, how does it feel? Because and the reason why I bring this up is because, like, literally just before, when I was waiting for you, one of the guys at the gym here just came up to me and goes, "Oh, you're Johnny Yap, right?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I listened to this episode," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, man." Like,
it's cool.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so it's interesting when that happens, and like, when I go to events and people are like, "Oh yeah, I listened to this or I listened to that." It's like, for me personally, I don't think about it like that.
Yeah.
Like, when I'm having these conversations, like, I'm wholly locked in on the person that I'm talking to, and trying to glean insights selfishly for myself.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of how they view life and how they view the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I guess how is that sort of how are you dealing with it?
Man, again, it's like we were just talking about how I feel like nothing has changed. Like, yes, people notice me on the street more. People come up for photos. People, it hasn't really changed anything, to be honest. It's kind of embarrassing a little bit, because there was actually it's embarrassing, but also it's like nice in a sense, because me and my partner Sarah, we were just leaving Big W or Kmart or some store, and we're going through the self checkout, and all I hear is, like, in the background, little rumblings. Oh, is that Josh? Is that Josh? And I'm just like, kind of like, surely they're not talking about me. And as I'm walking out with Sarah, a group of teenage boys, they're all like, "Oh my God, that's Josh Culibao," and they're all getting their Snapchat out and trying to film me and stuff. And it's like, it's a little bit like, I don't know, like, I'm getting all this notoriety for doing what I love to do.
Yeah.
And it's only now that I'm getting this just because of the UFC. You know what I mean? And yeah, I don't feel like anything else is different. Like, yeah, people know me, but I still, my mates still give me shit. My brothers still give me shit. I'm still the baby brother in the family. My partner still treats me the same way. It's all the same to me. Nothing has really changed besides that.
I think that's the best way to approach it. You can't let these things change how you approach things.
Yeah.
Like, even, we were talking before we started the podcast about how, I've started really doing a lot more clips and things like that. And that, even though I do these clips and I'm trying to clip up some stories, it's just to try and make the content more digestible. Because, it's a big investment when people, like, will jump on a channel and then they'll go, "Oh, this episode's 2 hours."
Yeah.
Like, do I really have 2 hours that I want to spend when I don't really know what I'm getting?
Yeah.
Whereas, if I sort of break apart these little bits and pieces, people then know
insight into it.
And then they go, "Okay, I actually really need to listen to this."
Yeah.
And then, I think for me, like, what I actually take, what I enjoy is when post a podcast, if somebody, has really enjoyed the way that they're able to express themselves. The worst is when somebody comes away from the podcast and they go, "Oh,
I didn't feel like I got to say what I wanted to say."
Yeah. Like, that's, I think that's probably the art to, doing the podcast is trying to allow people to get everything out that they want to share.
Yeah.
And obviously avoiding the topics that they don't want to talk about. Can we talk a little bit about relationships?
Yeah.
And I'm curious about this because, in terms of, I guess, as most people grow up, right? Like, they when we talk about personal relationships, it's never an easy topic. Some people are fortunate to find the right person, other people aren't. But I guess, in terms of how you've approached personal relationships, so romantically, I guess, is there like, how long have you been with Sarah? And
so I've been with Sarah for going on 6 years this year in May.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been going together for a long time now.
Yeah.
having a partner like Sarah, it's how do I put it? She just fits in my life so perfectly. Like from the day that I met her, it just everything just blended in so well. It just like honestly, when I first met her, it felt like I'd already known her, my whole life. Like, and yeah, we just clicked. That was it.
Yeah.
And again, it just like with martial arts, it just clicked with me. I feel like it's not something that I was out looking for, and then it just found me, and then it just stuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just same with the martial arts, same with my relationship with Sarah. It was just out of nowhere, and then and it just stuck.
Does she challenge you to grow in particular ways? Like I guess I think in any relationship, right, communication is one of the fundamentals, and unfortunately, sometimes, especially males, we're not very good communicators.
No, yeah.
And so, I can speak to this because, I think there was a period in my life where I was very touchy about the situation with my mum. It took me a long time to be comfortable to speak about it.
Yep.
And, at the same time, because of what happened with my mum, like I had a very fractured relationship with my dad for a very long time.
Yep.
So, there was almost like this touchiness about that subject, and when people would get a bit close, that'd sort of be like, I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to actually be able to,
feel vulnerable and let them in that sort of space. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, was that, did you ever have any difficulties with that, or were you pretty comfortable from the get-go?
I've always been a pretty emotional person, and Sarah has always been, that like I've gone through a few rough patches in my life, and I won't speak on what the problems were, but she's always been, whenever I needed her to step up, she's stepped up, and she's been the one that's been able to keep me up. A few times before I even got to sign to the UFC, I was like questioning, do I really want to keep going? Like at that stage, I was getting no fights as a professional. I was the ranked #1 in the country. I hadn't fought for a while, and I didn't know if I was going to fight again, like if I was going to get signed, and if I wasn't going to get signed, I might as well just stop. And she was one of the people that was like, to push me, to say, Josh, this is what you love. This is who you are. This is your passion. And for you to stop would be basically just killing yourself. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Well, full credit to, I think the having a supportive partner, like as much as people don't, there's this whole thing, about there's no genders and things like that nowadays. But, that old saying, behind every great man, there's a great woman, right? And then the next part of it is behind every failed man, there's two. Now, one of the things that I also really admire about you is that even though, you're doing all these other things and, you're on the UFC roster, et cetera, is that you're at almost every event supporting your teammates. And I guess, this is probably an opportunity for us to talk about the Australian scene of mixed martial arts, and especially the amateur scene, because it's very different to when you were going through it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more promotions, and I feel like, especially with like what combatants do and the live streaming and things like that, it's a lot better from that perspective, that fighters can have a bit of a, like they're starting to build a platform before they get to the big lights, and they're actually getting the feel of like a big show before they get to the big show, right?
Yeah.
So I guess for you as a teammate, I'm sure you also coach these guys as well.
Yep.
I guess what are some of the influences that you try and bring into the room?
Like I always, like I said to you just previously before, is that like I see these guys as me, the younger version of me, and I always think to myself, what I would have done to have a captain, a teammate that's in the UFC that has already been through all of this to show me and guide me. I never had that. All I had was ego.
Yeah.
Ego, and that was it. And yeah, I want to be literally the big brother, the Kuya of the team, you know what I mean? And show these guys, the path that I went through, and try to guide them. I mean, I do see, it's funny. A lot of the guys in the gym, I see bits and pieces of myself in each one of them. Even though they might be like different personalities, I see those personalities, my personalities in them, in each one of them. Yeah. So I treat these guys literally like they're like my younger brothers. I treat them like I take them in. I show them as much as I can. I try to speak to them about experiences that I've been through, and I try and guide them through everything that I've been through, and guide them, try to push them in the right direction. But at the end of the day, it's always up to them. I can always tell them all about experiences and stuff, but they will never learn until I feel like they go through
through it.
themselves. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then, can you speak a little bit about Igor and some of the impacts that he has had on you? Because you mentioned, like, you treat Igor like your dad.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, like during that time that I did lose my actual father, I was looking for a new gym because my gym that I was training at, which was Excel Combat Academy in Malabar or Hillsdale, it shut down due to financial reasons. So I was looking for a new gym, and I was looking for an MMA gym, and there was no MMA gyms around, and typed in MMA gym, and Igor MMA popped up, and I went to the gym, and this was again during the time that I was I had just lost my father, and I was still at that stage where I just wanted to get my mind off something, especially the gym closing down didn't help. So I was looking for something to, occupy me. And I found Igor MMA, and I don't know what it was about Igor. Like, as soon as I met him, it was just like he had the father figure. He had that, like, disciplined sort of approach that I needed, and that it was very similar to my own dad. Like, he was very, like, straightforward, and he just, I don't know, he just took on that father figure so much. And one of the things he said to me when we first met, and I told him that, like, I want to fight, this is what I want to do, and he said to me straight up, and he goes, Josh, if you are not willing to give me your 100%, why should I give you my 100%? That's what he said to me from the beginning. So that's how straightforward he was.
Yeah.
Like, he goes, I'm not going to invest all my time to get you there if you're not even going to give yourself the chance. So that was, like, the massive thing that he said to me. Is like, but he's right. Like, and it opened my eyes, and everything was just, again, he's just an amazing guy, to be honest. Like, he's definitely that, we just spoke about it, is that he's definitely, like, he's both do as I say and do as I do, because he actually lives the whole martial arts lifestyle.
Yep.
Man, honestly, there's not enough good things that I can say about him. He's truly an amazing guy. And as much as he is a coach, I was able to speak to him on more than just the gym or the fighting side of things. Like, I was able to speak to him on a personal level, on an emotional level, and that's what really made us connect and made me really believe in everything that he told me. So I felt like our connection just like really, we just, from the beginning, we just connected.
We were just talking. He's you can't really see him, but he literally just popped in right behind us.
Who's that, coach?
Igor.
Coach? Wow.
Yeah. His ears are ringing.
Yeah, his ears are ringing.
Yeah. Now, I think it's a very important factor, because sometimes in competition, especially, when the fighters might be evenly matched, the corners can make such a big difference.
Yeah.
They have to have that awareness in terms of what does the fighter need.
Yeah.
What are the insights that they need, and what there are some fighters that listen really well, and there's other fighters that need to be woken up, or whatever the case may be. And only through that connection can a coach really extract the best out of a person.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I think before we finish up, so we can get some work in, is that when it comes to you and approaching your training, do you find that you go through these periods of massive peaks and troughs that lead up to the fight, or I guess from your perspective, like in terms of how you approach things, are you trying to be more consistent in your approach to training as well?
A bit of both. It's a mixture of both. I do feel like, especially in fight camps, I do go through the stages of, like, maybe I'm being a bit too rough on myself and I'm not doing what I feel like I should be doing. And that puts me obviously in the down. And then obviously getting close to the fight, I feel like I'm starting to hit the game plan, the techniques that I've been working, I'm hitting them. And then, and then just obviously outside of fight camps, I've just tried to, again, when you don't have a fight lined up, it's like, it's hard to be motivated. So I've tried to switch my mentality of not whether there's a fight camp or not, but more so just enjoy learning. Like what we said before, is like trying to learn new things, make yourself feel uncomfortable. And that's basically what I've been trying to do consistently throughout my whole time that I've been training and fighting. Is always not whether I've got a competition or not, or whether I've got a fight or not. It was just constantly learning and enjoying being in here learning. It was, so. Do
you put much emphasis in terms of like doing like film study and things like that, or do you leave that to coaches to do? Or
again, like I have a pretty bad. I've learned like now as I'm getting a bit older. Like I had a pretty big obsession with like my mind would not just switch off on MMA. I'd go to the gym for 3-4 hours. I'd come home. I'd eat dinner, and first thing I'm on YouTube. I'm watching this. I'm watching this fight, and my mind would just be constantly on MMA. Where I've learned to sort of like separate the two because you need balance. Yeah. And it goes too much. This is what I'm trying to teach some of the younger kids in this gym, so that like you have to have something that is gonna tick you over rather than just keep constantly. Because we got a few guys in this gym. Perry Smith, who's like
young
obsessed with it. He is obsessed. To be honest, all the boys are pretty obsessed. They'll fight on the weekend. They'll be back in on Monday. I'm like, man, you guys also have to have the balance of knowing when to rest and when to, you know what I mean? So I used to be the same, obsessed. Watch it, train it, live and breathe it. But I've learned, get a girlfriend, find other hobbies that gives you that balance. But
that's the difference between knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
Right? Knowledge you can study for all the knowledge that you need, but wisdom you need to gain experience.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a beautiful way to end this. Let's get some work in. So people obviously, if you're not already following, what are you doing? It should be at Josh. You should be following Josh Culibao on Instagram.
Yeah.
And did you want to shout out any of your sponsors while we're here?
Shout out Athletes Nutrition for all my meals. Shout out CMBT for all the protein products. Supplements, and shout out to DMFS, Dem Things. They always hook us up with the best clothes. And shout out to Johnny Apps for getting me on the podcast and being able to speak more so than just the typical fight stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't what you were expecting, was it?
No, it was good. It was good. It was a little bit personal and it felt like a little bit of like a therapy session.
You'd be amazed at how many times people would say that to me. And that's why it's important for me that, no matter what happens with this podcast, I always want to keep it real like that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
genuine.
Yeah.
We spoke about that being like genuine, not trying to put it on.
Yeah. I'm not looking for a clip. I'm looking to actually, I want to understand your heart. I want to understand your mind.
Yeah.
And then, and that's the beautiful thing about this podcast, because every guest that I've had on, I can not speak to that person for a year or something, but we still have that connection because we shared that moment together. Yeah. And that was the beauty.
That's mad. That's so good.
Yeah. All right, let's get some work in. Thank you.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate that, bro. That's good.